Welcome to That Trucking Gospel. This week's episode is going to be a fun one. We got James Cade here talking about the maintenance side of the business, a little bit about EV and how that potentially could disrupt the supply chain.
Long horns on the hood, and I'm still gripping wood, still tipping, baby, sitting sideways. Texas heat on the candy paint, in and out of county lanes, baby, I love to swing. Find me posted on the corner with a couple cold Coronas and some outlaws out today. When we started, we were sober, baby, it ain't even over. They gon' have to drag us out this place. Yeah, it's different down here, you know.
James has over 40 years experience in managing fleet assets and maintenance operations for some of the largest fleets in the country. James was hired as a technician and then rose to a position of vice president of maintenance, overseeing maintenance operations in North America and in Europe. He now owns Asset and Maintenance Insight, a consulting firm focused on the maintenance side of the industry. Hey, James, welcome to That Trucking Gospel. I appreciate you joining us today. And just to kick off the show, first thing I'd like to do is just kind of talk a little bit about your history, where you've been, what you're doing now, how you got into the industry, and then we'll kind of dive into some of that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation to spend some time talking to you today. I got into the industry. I guess I would say I was born into it because my grandfather had a small trucking company, and I kind of grew up in that. I remember my first job was 11 years old, and I was paid $1 a truck to grease the chassis and drive lines on each of his trucks. So if I missed a grease circ, I didn't get my dollar. So I was it taught me quality control pretty quickly. And I just grew up from that. My grandfather retired, and I went to work for Ryder in Des Moines, and the rest is history. Went from being a technician, working for, called the mechanics back then, but technician, and from that ended up being the vice president of maintenance for Ryder, operating out of their corporate office in Miami. Did that for 25 years. And then bounced around a couple other companies, USA Truck, and my last full-time position was with Ruan Transportation as vice president of asset and maintenance.
Man, so we talk about a resume in the consulting world. I'm pretty sure that you've been there, done starting at 11 years old. It kind of
he started from the bottom. Now
that's right.
So
Earned his
greasing
stripe.
the truck is definitely the start.
I think you can relate to that a little bit too. He's got 4 boys, and man, they're already crawling under.
They're
the
at
trucks.
home greasing the trucks right now.
Yeah.
So and I got a count of every nipple on that truck, so I know exactly how many are on them.
Yeah, that's one thing that really sets companies apart. As long as that, you got to get your maintenance in line for sure. Pre-trips, post-trips, make sure your PMs are done.
You know, I put a lot of that my background and experience in that from 2 areas. One, I think my grandfather really drilled into me the importance of quality, and then my 25 years with Ryder really impressed on me the importance of process and making sure that you communicated that. So again, that's I think was probably the 2 biggest factors in my background in my life is why I've had pretty good success in the maintenance industry.
So let's talk a little bit about your past. So when you in the maintenance industry, I'm assuming your time at USA Truck and Ruan, there wasn't a ton of conversations around EV and innovation around the business. So how did you get from, living in this maintenance world to now part of your career is focused on, innovation, the future and EV and charging stations? How did you get there?
Well, somewhere along the line, I figured out that maintenance was largely impacted by assets, as far as the type of assets and the specifications he had on it. So I tended to move towards roles that managed not only the maintenance but also the assets. So the last 15 years or so was managing both sides of the coin. And as part of the asset side, we started hearing things about EVs and electric vehicle trucks. And it just moved so quickly. In fact, I remember having a conversation with the CEO of Ruan, and he asked me one day, he says, "What do you think of this electric trucks?" And this was probably 2018, 2019. And I said, I remember very distinctly telling him, well, there'll never be an electric truck in my lifetime. And here we are today. I mean, I'm knee deep into it. So again, it's something that came up very quickly. I realized that one, it was at Ruan, was the company I was working for, was very well suited to look at EVs, and started doing a lot of research, talking to a lot of companies, put the first electric vehicles into Ruan before I left. But from that, continued to be involved in it, and realized early on that there wasn't any industry experts really around EV maintenance. So I spent a lot of time researching and working with different companies to understand what was required to do EV maintenance. And along the line, I picked up a lot of knowledge and a lot of information, and not only on the vehicles, but now I'm also certified in EV charging stations as well. So it's been quite a transformation for me. If you had told me, 5, 6 years ago that I'd be this deep into it, I told you you're crazy. But I have really got up to my neck into the EV world.
So these EV trucks, I got a question about them. Are they similar to the semis that are on the road now as far as chassis components?
A lot of it is you still have the same wheels and axle, or in some cases axles. Cab is all pretty much all the same. The challenge or the difference is that you don't have a diesel engine, you have an electric motor, and the big thing is you have these battery packs which provide the power to the electric motors to drive the chassis. As things have progressed, it started out with being, the batteries drove an electric motor, which was basically replacing the diesel engine, still had a transmission, still had a drive shaft, and still had the original axles. That's kind of evolved now into there's an electric motor. A lot of times it's mounted directly in the axle itself. So it's a really compact arrangement. But other than the electric motor and the batteries, pretty much the same components.
Because I've actually seen a couple of EVs on YouTube, and I've seen that some of them had the original axles, and then some of them, like you said, had motors in the axles. So I immediately my brain went to thinking the axle setups of semi trucks have been the same for a generation already. The understanding of how the function is and the mechanics in that field, man, how difficult or is it going to be to train them to prepare for something like that? It's just
Well, moving the axle and the motor into the same component is really a lot more efficient. But your point about technicians and what they need to know is it is a different world. I've had some strong discussions with other people in the industry that think that we need to go out and develop this whole new class of technicians just to work on the EV side or the electric side of the vehicle. But they forget about the other side. I mean, you still have the wheels and the tires and all that, and other components within the vehicle. So my point has always been, since I've been in this, is let's not go out and reinvent the wheel. Let's take our existing technicians that have a major understanding of how the vehicle works and create the skills for them to become the EV technicians of the world, of the new world, basically around these EVs.
Hey, let's take a quick break for a minute to say thank you to our sponsor, Unity Brokering, for this show today. Unity Brokering focuses on optimizing your supply chains, leveraging the relationships with their customers and their carriers. If you would like to get in contact with Unity, please email dispatch@unitybrokering.com. Let's get back to the show. So thinking about that, when you were at Ruan and USA Truck and you had a maintenance breakdown, that disruption of the supply chain, right? Let's walk through that a little bit on the kind of the process. And then today on some of these, companies that have gone EV, what that disruption to the supply chain looks like today compared to what it did, let's say 5 years ago. Because you already kind of said it. There's going to be a big difference because we're just not quite ready there on the infrastructure side.
Well, for any fleet that I've managed, I've done it both ways, internally and externally. Manage the breakdown process, or the maintenance away from the home terminals, um, through a third parties, either through directly or through a third party managing that process. And I've done it both ways, and I tend to like doing a third party because they're more efficient about it, and that's their core business. But either way you do it, I mean, the one thing that whether it's an EV or traditional truck is you can't wait until you have a breakdown to start planning for it. You've got to have a process in place to handle that and think through that process. Yeah, I think unfortunately, a lot of small or medium, even medium-sized companies don't do that. They don't understand that they're going to have problems. It's just like any vendor that I have. I know we're going to have problems. It's how you resolve that problem is the difference between different suppliers. And I think it's the same thing, a difference between fleets. You know, I the last company I was with, it was a dedicated contract carrier primarily, and I was surprised at the number of carriers that came in or provided RFPs for providing services to them that really had no questions or um, any direct, I guess, questions overall how we would handle breakdowns, because it is such a big impact on the supply chain and the reliability of the supply chain. So again, my point is that you can't wait until you have a problem. You got to have a process. You got to have the ability to engage either the third party or outside network or whatever, but you've got to be able to use that to your ability to get the vehicle back on the road as quick as possible, and that's the name of the game. So
Yeah, and another thing it makes me think of from a shipper's perspective, right? When they think about how I'm going to source capacity, where I'm going to, am I using an asset-based company? Am I using a broker? Sustainability is now a big thing in our industry. And so when I think about EV and I think about the past, it's interesting to me because they're pushing sustainability, but also on the other hand, we're just not quite ready. We're not quite there, even though we're pushing it hard. So what does it look like from a shipper's perspective that's saying, hey, I'm pushing you to do this, but we're not quite there. We don't have people to be able to get the charging stations fixed fast enough, or, the technology is not quite where we need to be. Is there like a fine line between we're there, we're in the future, like we are there where EV trucks will become a thing, or are we still kind of on that teeter totter that we have some work to do?
definitely have some work to do. I think with the niche right now I think is for EVs is in light duty, and some medium duty applications. You have light duty. They're mostly like FedEx, Amazon, UPS. They're more concerned about delivering packages in residential areas. One is they don't have the emissions that they're providing if they're using an electric vehicle, but they also don't have to worry about weight, and typically they don't have to worry about range, which are the two big issues for the definitely for the heavy duty side. So again, I think right now with EVs have a very strong niche in the light duty and some applications in the medium duty. When it comes to heavy duty, um, it's really a challenge for a heavy duty fleet right now to be an EV operator. Um, and the challenge is not whether they right now, the biggest challenge is not the vehicle. You can go out and buy a vehicle if you can afford it. For one, I mean, there's quite a premium for an electric heavy duty vehicle right now. Um, but the challenge is getting the infrastructure to support that vehicle. One is where's the electricity going to come from? You know, typically, in the way things have done over the last 30, 40 years, is you have fleets that trying to reduce cost have leased facilities, and typically they're in facility or areas of the city or urban industrial areas where maybe the places were built in the 40s and 50s and don't have the electrical infrastructure to be able to provide to that location. So you're talking about the utility running just to provide the utility to that location, is running a substation out to that area, and then providing the lines coming into the property to be able to do that. And that all takes time. One of the challenges with EVs right now is that if I wanted, I'm working for a company and they told me to go, let's go 100% EV, and they said, how long will it take you? Well, it'll probably take us about 3 years, because getting the vehicles is one thing, getting set up on the chargers is another, and getting the power to that facility is another. So again, it could take as much as 3 years. I've seen it as little as a year and a half, if for the right, everything lines up properly. But again, it's an extended period of time just to get the facilities in place. So again, the infrastructure is not there right now. I'm not even talking about, can the grid handle electric vehicles right now. That's beyond my calculation. We'll have to rely on somebody else to answer that. But as far as getting the power to where the trucks are is the biggest issue right now.
So, James, you were raised around diesel trucks. So, how is your feeling? What are your personal thoughts on this EV trucking? I still have oil under my fingernails right now from last night. So, I don't know. I just haven't been able to quite wrap my heart around it yet. But, I don't want to not go with the punches.
Yeah, I'm similar to you. As I grew up with diesel, no diesel, been around it for years. But then you look at the diesel though, but the government regulations for emissions on those vehicles is getting to the point. There was another round of a new emissions plate just went into place January of this year, 2024. There's another round of emission requirements in 2027, which are going to be very, very difficult and very expensive for engine manufacturers, truck manufacturers to meet. And then they're already talking about additional emissions past that level. So again, I think one of the things you have going on is between diesel and electric is you have electric, came out. If you're just looking at strictly at price, you've got an electric truck that's already a premium above a diesel today. But when you look at it down the road, you're going to see the diesel price keep going up, and you're probably going to see the electric vehicle doing the volumes and everything else that's going on come down a little bit. Are they ever going to be in balance? I don't know, but it's really I think there's a lot of things going on the diesel side that is going to make it difficult to operate diesels in the future. And then you have the regulations. I think California, of course, California is doing everything. Um, I think they have some discussions going on right now about outright outlawing diesel engines in the 2030, 35 range. So again, it's although I have an emotional attachment to diesel because that's what I'm familiar with and what I grew up with, I'm also being realistic, I guess, and looking at electric vehicles as being probably the future of the industry. We got a lot of work to do, and the infrastructure's there. The range issues today with the current diesel heavy duty electric vehicles, and the weight. The big issue right now for fleets is the weight. When you look at when I was buying the last heavy duty tractors that I bought directly, we were trying to stay under 16,000 pounds for the power unit. And today, when you look at a electric vehicle, it's somewhere between a heavy duty electric vehicle. You're somewhere between 28 and 30,000 pounds, almost double the weight. So again, that's going to take away from the payload that a fleet can use and can haul on their vehicle. So again, there has to be some compromise. Do we raise the weight limits to allow that? A lot of people don't like that. Or do we try to bring the weight of the batteries down, which is the big issue? And I think there's a lot of effort and a lot of money being thrown around for research for those two issues, to bring the weight down and the range up.
So it makes me think though, like for one, you have more knowledge in one finger than I have on anything about EV at this moment. But it's making me think like for a company, right? Especially a small to mid-size. I'm just going to use this number, but if you say if we're trying to get to that by 2035, think about the capital investment that takes over a 5, 10, 15-year span for somebody to be prepared for that. Some companies can't do that. They're not going to be able to make that happen. So it's interesting when you throw those numbers, it just makes me think about that. Like we're handicapping the industry when it comes to how are we going to get there?
Some new political leaders are sounding really attractive right now. It sounds like the cure could be deregulation and drill, baby, drill.
Yeah, we can't make this a political podcast now. We might have to cut that out.
But when you look at the industry in total, the fleets out there, I forget the exact number, but it's 3/4 to 7/8 of the entire industry is made up of small companies with less than 20 trucks.
Yeah,
How
80%
are they
is what we
going?
got this morning. 80%.
80%. How are they going to do this transition to electric? It's going to be crazy. I mean, I don't know. A lot of them aren't going to survive it. I don't know if, again, going back to the political side, I don't know if that's a plan of it,
That's okay.
but again, it is a challenge for anybody. And then you look at these small companies, how are they going to do this? And it's really a challenge. Even, then you look at owner operators. How are owner operators going to make that change, or act that
One way they
transition?
can do it is they can stop giving the money to Ukraine.
Stop. James, I know you remember this because I feel like my brain is not wrapping around this, but I feel like we were working together around USA Truck when this happened. Maybe not, so maybe I'm misspeaking. But I remember when ELDs were becoming the requirement and how big of a pain it was for big companies just to get their fleet ready to be ELD compliant. And now I'm sitting here thinking about this EV game and talking about the future, and I'm like, man, if some companies struggle with the ELDs, how are we even going to get there? So this is a fun conversation
Well,
for me.
ECMs were introduced into vehicles in the early 90s. So they had time, before an ELD came out 25 years later to be able to make that function work with the truck,
Right.
But we're talking about completely changing the game now.
That's the biggest concern I see for heavy duty trucks is I think it's an arbitrary goal. They've already had to, in California, for example, they've already had to push back in the ports the California regulations because they didn't have anybody that could meet the requirements for EVs in the drayage operations. So they had to push that back. And I think we're just going to see that happen. But the challenge, for fleets is to be able to prosper and be successful. Fleets need stability. And it's not, everything we're talking about here is disrupting that whole process and their whole operations. And, when I talk to companies about EVs, I talk to them about, well, you have to rethink how you're going to do things, not just, oh, I'm going to put an electric truck in and you can't do it the same way because uh, you have a lot of issues. If you can get get the utilities in place, you get the chargers in place. How many chargers do you need for your fleet? Which is probably going to be a lot more than the single fuel pump you have out in your yard right now, if you have one at all. And then how do you recharge? How do you manage that process? So again, it's just there's a lot more factors to take into account, and a lot of change, which as both of you know, our industry doesn't handle change very well.
It's so archaic.
Have you been seeing that Ford and GM, they've been losing billions of dollars in EV, and this month they suspended operations. GM ended up, I think the average cost is $30,000 a vehicle in losses on EVs right now.
Well, just there's been a lot of saw recently where Hertz jumped into the EV for rental cars big time. Now they're going to take 20,000 EVs out and dump them into the market because one, customers don't want them, because it is a big change. And secondly, is they're finding that it's not so much the repairs to the EV itself is a concern. It's more of um, the body damage and whatever is a lot more expensive to repair. So their operating costs for that EV is much higher than it would for a gasoline powered vehicle. So they're between the combination of the customers don't want them, and secondly, is they're higher to operate, then they've decided to dump 20,000 used EVs back into the marketplace.
That's crazy. And, we've talked a lot about kind of where we were in the maintenance industry, kind of where we're at now, where we're going. And the thing we haven't really touched and we might not be able to, but man, how do you, when you go EV, how do you even price that? It's like the trucks cost an arm and a leg. You don't really have a fuel cost, but I have a fixed cost in my charging stations, telling what my maintenance cost is going to be.
Usually it works like this. If you're doing it for cheaper, the customer wants it cheaper.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
One of the challenges with EVs, and I've had this discussion with some other people, is that one of the things that especially larger companies is they'll go out and negotiate a fuel price with a national chain like Love's or TA or whoever, and so they know pretty much what their price of fuel is going to be or within a range, so they're able to provide that fuel surcharge back to the customer if fuel prices spike. The problem with electric power is it ranges all over the country is different. You go to California where electric power is somewhere between 25 and 30 cents a kilowatt for charging, and then you come here to Iowa, and where we have a large percentage of our power comes from windmills. Our power cost per kilowatt's 8 cents a kilowatt, and then you get into the demand charges, and there's a lot of big issues that still haven't been resolved around EV. And to your point of how do you go to a customer and price is going to be a big challenge.
Still got to look at the lane level. It's funny how that always happens. Like, where you going? What's the cost going to be? It's crazy. It's like it's not. Talk about being archaic. It's not going to change much. My cost is still different, and I have to pass that on to somebody.
I think it can really work with light duty, like he was saying, and it is working. I mean, the golf carts, they've done a great job being electric for quite some time, and they've made these electric bikes and scooters and all these that are really efficient, and the charging station is at your house. It's not something that you have to set up too drastically to get it charged. But with big trucks,
Well, you look at Amazon, for example, is one I just read where Amazon passed 10,000 Rivian vehicles in their fleet now, and continuing to grow. They want to grow that fleet, and it fits their model. It really does, because the vehicles have short range. They go out, deliver packages, and come back, and they can charge that night. It doesn't work that way with a heavy duty diesel truck going all over the country. How do you recharge that vehicle?
Yeah, Amazon's building their team to take care of their self, where over the road and heavy freight, like, you have to rely on the industry, if you will. So, I mean, I love this conversation. I'm really going to continue to keep looking into it, so I can see it, like, starting small, get medium, and then listen. Some states by 2035, you better have it together.
we have either the beginning of EVs or
Right.
the end of EVs.
Yeah.
And one or the other is on the way.
Yeah, that's right. So for me, I just like to think about this conversation from a customer's perspective, because you bring up a really good point. Most people, and I don't want to speak for everybody, I don't want to speak for anybody, but most people think EVs is a lot lesser cost, right? It's supposed to save me fuel costs, especially with the market kind of being feast or famine. But it sounds like that early on, it may not be the case. It could be a little bit more to start.
Well, and there's not any real numbers that I've been able to find anywhere about, well, other than Pepsi. Pepsi did release, they're operating a heavy duty fleet out of California with Tesla, but it's a very controlled program, and they're releasing some information out. But I look to the automotive market and just kind of an indicator of where we're going to be in the future. and you look at a couple of studies that were done and over the last year or so, one of them shows that is done by J.D. Powers, and it was, they show or were able to show that EV auto vehicles have had a much higher cost than gasoline powered vehicles. And some of the things, it wasn't so much around electronics or electric side of the vehicle. It was everything associated and around it that was what was some of the issues. I mean, again, it's the cost and the downtime was much higher because it's a new technology. Quite honestly, we're still in the early stages of development. Gas and diesel has had this what 70 plus year time to improve and become more efficient and all that. So again, it's still early on with EVs. So again, but the early numbers don't look very good. I expect they'll be better over time.
Got to get more people to buy in.
Yeah, the volume will come up, componentry will come, costs will come down. Manufacturers will get better once they get, it's just like anything, they get feedback from the industry. My biggest concern is a lot of these startup companies out there trying to develop both light duty and heavy duty vehicles, not having the understanding of what it takes or how like a Freightliner or Kenworth or whoever, all the years it took to them to develop to the level of reliability that we have today with gas and diesel and understand all those things that have to happen. So I think that a lot of them have a large or a very large learning curve they have to go through to be able to improve the reliability and bring down the overall cost of the vehicles.
It's crazy because we actually were just talking about that recently. I was researching a little bit of the EV and we were talking about it for our asset side of the business. And the conversation only lasted about 5-10 minutes because it's like it's not going to work for us today. Like it's not today's problem for us. We just can't do it. It's just not feasible because we have one pump and it's the maintenance side is structured for what we do, especially in that.
I kept picturing a scenario. I had a rear end in a truck go out, and I went and got a price at Freightliner for that rear end, $3,000. Then I went to Inland Truck Parts and priced the rear end, $2,000. And then I went to a junkyard, found the rear end for $900. I'm thinking if you only have one person that's making that part, Inland's more of or Freightliner's more of a genuine part, and then Inland's going to be an aftermarket, and then you got your used part. If you only can get that motor that's in that axle at one place, what do you think sounds like they're going to do what International's doing to everybody in the industry. That's why nobody wants to buy their trucks either.
There's a lot more to it also. There's from the point of if you're operating an RV or I'm sorry, EV vehicle, whether it's a automotive or mid-range or heavy duty, one of the issues is to your point, if you have a problem, you got to go back to that manufacturer for that part. And I can tell you from my experience so far is those parts aren't readily available. So one of the issues with EVs right now is once they do have a problem, it's a very extensive downtime to be able to diagnose the problem, get back with the manufacturer. The manufacturer many times has to go overseas to get the part, wait for a cargo ship, bring it in. So you're sitting there for quite a while with the vehicle down. So downtime is an issue right now with EV vehicles.
And downtime
In this industry is
money.
yeah.
Downtime is money. Even if you're not spending it to fix it, it's still costing you something.
And then you got the EV side, but you also have the chargers. One of the main concerns with chargers today is their reliability. There's a lot of challenges, and there's a lot of different suppliers of chargers out there. I just saw yesterday where Michigan was awarded $1.7 million by the federal government to go repair 104 chargers that have been out of service for, in some cases, years, because nobody had the money to repair them, so they just sat there. So now the federal government's getting into the repair business for chargers. So charger reliability is a big issue as well. Is not only from the point of the overall reliability, and there's a variability between companies, just like trucks. But the other side of the issue is finding somebody to repair that charger, just like the truck. Is many cases the only choice is to go out and get in a full blown electrician who really, in some cases, doesn't know anything about the charger, to come in, and they're $350, $400 an hour to do, to in some cases learn about the charger before they even repair it. So there's a lot of still open issues around not only the vehicles but also the chargers that have to be addressed.
So if I'm hearing you right, James, you're pretty much saying if you were giving a young person advice coming into the maintenance industry, go learn chargers. Go learn how to repair a charger and learn all about the EV side.
EVs and chargers. I mean, for practical purposes, you have the same skill sets. There really shouldn't be any reason why a technician, an EV technician, shouldn't be able to do most the type of repairs. Maybe not the installation, but the repairs to a charger as well.
Would you say some of that, and I'm going to use Michigan, of just sitting there because some people's afraid to even touch it because like the what if behind it as well? Because like you said, they already have the know-how. Just got to be able to put it all together. Understand how it works. Is that the big factor?
Well, some of the chargers, I mean, it's, when again, it gets into a lot more detail, but you have different levels of chargers. The one charger for a heavy duty truck is a lot more robust than than you might have in your garage to charge your personal vehicle. And some of those smaller chargers are not repairable because there's like transistor radios. You buy one and it fails, you just throw it away and go get another one. It's the same way with some of these chargers. They're just not repairable, so you don't have any choice but to replace them, and that can become expensive as well.
It's like an iPhone charger from China. You use it 2 or 3 times, and then you got to bend it in the right direction.
Why do we always get political over here out of this chair? Hey,
Well,
listen.
it's 2024, Chris.
Hey, listen, I am connected with James on LinkedIn. Believe me, we can probably get into a pretty deep political conversation, couldn't we, James? Yeah, I've seen his posts.
That's funny.
And let's just say we sit on the same side of the fence when it comes to those posts. I'm always like, dang,
on the
James.
side of Jesus.
Yeah, Jesus' side for sure. Yeah. Well, listen, James, thank you so much for joining that Trucking Gospel. We appreciate this conversation. It's fun for me because I don't live in that world every day, but I really appreciate the insight you brought us. And congratulations on starting your consulting. But if anybody wanted to try to reach out to you and get in contact with you, what's the best way to do that?
Well, several different ways. I do have a website. It's www.fleetami.com.
All right, and you're on social media. I know you're on LinkedIn. Do you have any other platforms that you live on?
LinkedIn, also on Facebook. Those are the 2 main ones.
Well, thanks again for joining our show, James, and until next time, man, we'll see you.
Thank you guys for choosing that Trucking Gospel. We got new episodes dropping every Tuesday. You can find us on all social media platforms. We'll see you soon.